There are hundreds of different ways to make oboe reeds. This method is easy to follow and perfect for beginners to start making their own reeds that play in tune and vibrate well. First, soak a piece of cane for 20 minutes, then put the cane on the tube so the whole reed measures 72 millimeters. Make a pencil mark where the tube ends. Start wrapping the reed about 3 millimeters below that mark. These directions are for right-handed people. If you're left-handed, I'm sorry. Maybe I'll make a video for you later. Or hopefully a left-handed oboist will. Start with the thread underneath the reed and wrap upwards in a clockwise motion until you get to that pencil mark you made earlier. Then stop and cross the thread down. This is a good time to start fixing the overlap by pushing the cane just a little bit to the right so that the blade underneath is going to end up overlapping on the left. Now measure to make sure that that the thread goes to 47 millimeters. You do not want it to go above 47 millimeters because that will choke the reed. In this case, I actually went below and then I had to do another wrap upwards. That's why I went back to do that. But never go above 47 and never go above that mark you made. Also, with the back of the ruler, make sure that the reed is completely straight on both sides, that it's not leaning to either side. Now, keep wrapping, again in a clockwise motion, downwards. You can use your thumb as a guide to make sure that the thread doesn't leave any spaces. Always keep it nice and tight, but not too tight because you might break the thread. When you get near the bottom, about 4 millimeters from the bottom, you're going to use the 2 first fingers of your right hand to make a loop. You're going to put that loop over the tip of the reed. And bring it over the reed, keeping it all tight, and then tighten it at the bottom to make a really good knot. You can bring your thumbs together and pull them to make that knot really, really tight. If you waxed the thread, which I should have said earlier, you should always put beeswax on the thread before you make the reed, because that just helps that seal to be really perfect. Sometimes the reed can actually leak through the thread, so you want to avoid that by putting the beeswax on there and keeping it tight. Now you cut the reed off of the spool of thread with a razor blade or a knife. Make sure you have the right overlap. The cropping of the video makes it a little hard to see. But you should see that the blade on the back side juts out a little bit on the left. That's how you know you did it right. The most important thing now is to check that the reed is sealing. So you're going to blow through the reed and make sure that no air leaks out or no sound, it doesn't make a sound. Now we're going to start scraping the back. Imagine that there's a spine going up the very middle of the reed and that there are channels on both sides of that spine. Scrape up those channels completely straight, completely parallel. The method that we use, we're going to scrape 3 times in each channel and then repeat that on all 4 channels, the 2 on the side facing you and the 2 on the other side, 7 times. So we call this 3 times 7. When you're scraping the back, every once in a while, check that your spine is staying in the middle and staying very straight. Now we're going to start doing the tip. Measure 66.5 and mark it with a very sharp pencil on both sides. Then start scraping the tip in the form of an inverted V. You can draw the V if it helps you, just make sure that you draw it really well and symmetrically. Start scraping the tip in a diagonal motion, starting with that V and going out to the very corners. Make sure you don't take too much out of the sides at this point because you can actually cause holes that will prevent the reed from sealing later on. The reed should look like this before you clip it. Soak the tip of the reed and cut about 1/2 millimeter off the tip using a razor blade on a cutting block. I actually did that right before this edit, that's why you don't see it. Now you can put the plaque into the tip and start scraping the tip. I like to use a series of triangles, starting with a big triangle, tracing that original V that you made, so tracing each side of the V. And then another triangle about 3/4 of the way down, another about halfway down, and then the very tip. You can just dust that very tip. And keep scraping on each side. Try to keep it as even as you can. And then you can start trying to see if the reed will vibrate when you put it in your mouth and blow it with a pretty normal embouchure. So, obviously, this particular reed needs to be scraped a little bit more. If your cane is very, very soft or your gouge is very thin, sometimes at this point the reed will actually start to vibrate. And when it starts to vibrate, you're going to want to stop scraping the tip and get ready to do the next thing, which is scraping the windows. Just keep checking so that you don't go too far. Keep checking by trying to blow that reed in a normal playing position. And periodically, you should dip the reed in the water so it doesn't dry out and it doesn't crack. Be careful that you don't push up on that plaque or that you don't push with the knife. You should always make sure the knife is so well sharpened that you don't have to push very hard because you can cause the cane to crack. Mark 61.5 millimeters on each side of the reed. And then start scraping the windows in a parallel motion, just like we scraped the back, straight up and stopping at that mark. And just pull up the knife just a little bit so that you don't make a really strong line there. We're going to do a series of 3 scrapes in each window, 7 total times. So exactly the same thing we did on the back. 3 times on each window and repeat it 7 times. Make sure you don't lose track of the count. After you scrape the windows, go ahead and see if the reed will still make a sound when you blow on it. It's a good idea to take your oboe out now to start doing the playing tests, even though the reed is still going to be very hard. It's always better to start the tests early so that you don't go too far. The first playing test is a high A to a C chromatic scale, just as is played here. At this point, the reed will probably still be too hard and nice and high. At this point, you can start scraping the heart a little bit, just to get those vibrations to go all the way through the reed. You can scrape a little bit on the sides and not in the very center, but on both sides of the spine. So just dust that hard off a little bit on each side to get more vibrations going through the reed. Go ahead and test the reed again using a tuner to make sure that those high notes don't get flat. It should still be nice and high and pretty hard still. At this point, you can use the contoured plaque, and I really like the plastic ones because they're very gentle on the reed. And you use that plaque not for scraping the reed, because if you scrape on it, it can tear parts of the tip off. But you use that plaque to check if there are thick spots in the tip that stand out as being asymmetrical. And so I found a spot that was a little thick, so I'm scraping it here. You can scrape the tip a little bit more. Just make sure you don't take too much out at a time, because a very thin tip makes the reed sound wild and also flat. So try to keep especially as much in the middle of the tip as you can. The two major reed tests outside of the oboe are first playing the reed on the tip of the reed with your normal embouchure. It should sound a C and respond easily but gradually. The other test is the actual crow, which should be double octaves and at least a C sharp or higher. Still hard here. The reed is rattling at the top at that C. Again, that's because the tip has been scraped too much in comparison to the rest of the reed. A really easy way to fix that is to either clip the tip, or, as I'm going to do here, you can scrape the heart and you can scrape the blend. The blend is the area where that V meets the tip. So you can soften that V a little bit and make a scoop by scraping along the V just a little bit, teeny bit behind it, and just softening that V at the very, kind of at the top of the V. At the bottom on the sides, where you remember you originally marked the tip with the pencil, those sides you're gonna wanna keep that part more defined and less blended. That keeps the reed nice and focused. So here you can also scrape the very, very tip in preparation to clip it for the end of the day, because guess what? You've already made your first blank, or maybe your 1000th blank, I don't know. But you've made your first blank with this method. And now it's time to let the reed rest for a night, because the cane's going to change a little bit overnight, so you don't want to over scrape it. Now you can hear how differently it sounds once that balance has been corrected a little bit. It's going to be even better after it's clipped. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please leave any comments or questions below in Spanish or English. And please stay tuned for the next video, which is going to show how to finish the reed and how to tune it.